This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, the best online retailer for Magic the Gathering singles and sealed product, and GatheringMagic.com, the #1 source for Magic the Gathering news and content.
Hi, my name is Patrick, and this is my Anthousa Setessan Hero Commander deck. Alright, so here we are with Anthousa Setessan Hero. She's a 4/5 for 5 mana, 3 colorless and 2 green. She's from Theros. She's a human warrior, and she has the Theros ability of Heroic that states, whenever you cast a spell that targets Anthousa, Setessan Hero, up to 3 target lands you control each become 2/2 warrior creatures until end of turn. They're still lands. It's a pretty big ability, a lot of words in it. Most people believe that it's not the most powerful ability, and there's a bunch of other mono green commanders that can turn lands into creatures better. But I like the challenge of taking a commander that people don't think are that cool or that good, and then building a deck around them specifically, just to show that they can, still be playable and still fun. And there's a lot of cards in this deck that I didn't know existed until I started building this deck for Anthousa. So, and I'll tell you which ones those are. But let's begin. So we'll start with the lands. We have only a few non-basic lands, just because we want a high forest count, just because of a few cards that rely on the forests to work as effectively, and just because it's cheaper. It's a pretty budget deck. I built it for about, $30 or so. So let's see. We got Dryad Arbor, just because it's a land and can attack. Reliquary Tower, just because, every deck should have Reliquary Tower. Mosswort Bridge. This one is in here because of the Hideaway, that you can take one of the top 4 cards and put it under, and then you can use that free card when you have creatures of total power 10 or greater. Now, since Anthousa is a 4/5, and she makes 3 2/2 warriors, that all adds up to 10. So all you need to do is trigger her heroic, and then have another mana to pay for the Mosswort Bridge, and you get that free card. So it triggers a lot more often than other decks would. I have Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse, just because they're good to find the forests, thin out the deck just in the slightest. And then the rest are the non-basic lands, and I'm just going to shamelessly show off some of my altars just because I can. I plan on altering every single forest in this deck, just because it's fun. Let's get through all these. Alright. So we're going to begin with just a few equipments, just because they're good, and some random artifacts. First, Swiftfoot Boots, just because it's budget and it's good. Gives Anthousa hexproof so we don't blow ourselves out when we target her. Runechanter's Pike. It's weird that I'm playing Runechanter's Pike in green, obviously, but almost a third of the deck, if not more, are instants and sorceries. So, I can put this on even one of the lands that Anthousa activates, and it becomes this giant creature with first strike. And it's really fun to play the Runechanter's Pike when you're playing mono green and people look at you and you're like, what are you doing? Strata Scythe. This is one of the reasons why you want a lot of forests, because when you play it, you search your library for a forest, and then you imprint it. And the creature equipped with Strata Scythe gets +1/+1 for each land on the battlefield with the same name as the exiled card. So you exile a forest, and your creature gets +1/+1 for each forest on the battlefield, not just your side. And I didn't see that the first time I read, but then I read it again and was like, wow, it's pretty good. So it's in here. It's a lot of fun to put this on Dungrove Elder, because then it gets really huge and it's hexproof and stuff. Yeah, Dungrove Elders in this deck. Anyways, Mimic Vat. We don't have a lot of creatures. We have at max about 10. And it's just fun to take other people's creatures, you know, that have really good enter the battlefield abilities, or they're just really big so that we can just keep hitting with it. So, Nevinyrral's Disc. Sometimes you just need to blow up the world when things aren't going for you, and this is what you use. Mind's Eye. Like I said, we're mono green, so there's not a lot of drawing going on. So we want to draw as many cards as we can. So we will play Mind's Eye. So whenever someone else draws a card, we can pay one and draw one as well. So if you go around the table with mana up, and you have a 4-player pod, you're drawing 3 cards before your next turn. And that's pretty cool when the games go pretty long. Steel Hellkite. Green obviously has ways to get rid of artifacts, enchantments, blah blah blah. But it doesn't have good ways to interact with flyers or sweeping the board. So Steel Hellkite is, you know, big. It's a 5/5 for 6 flying, so it can block some flyers. And it also can destroy a token battlefield if you have someone playing a lot of tokens because of the bottom activity ability. So you attack them, Steel Hellkite, pay 0, and then you blow up all of their tokens and they'll get really sad. Good stuff. Precursor Golem is probably the MVP of the deck. It's a secret commander, I would say. Because what Precursor Golem does is, when it enters the battlefield, you put 2 3/3s golems onto the battlefield. So, for 5 mana, you get 9 power and 9 toughness. That's really cool. But then the other half of the card says, whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell that targets only a single golem, that player copies that spell for each other golem that spell could target. Each copy targets a different one of those golems. What the heck does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. It means when you target one of your golems with, say, Giant Growth, all 3 of your golems get Giant Growth. So instead of having 3/3s, you have 6s at that turn. I have a lot of instants and sorceries that also say draw a card on them after targeting a creature with, you know, giving a +1/+1 and trample or whatever. So instead of drawing 1 card off that instant or sorcery, you get 3 cards. You just have to be careful when you're playing a deck that, you know, can remove it, such as black or something, before you play it. So just be careful. I think the risks are definitely much better. You get a high reward than risk when playing Precursor Golem, because you can just play him the next turn, just pump him up dramatically with all your instants and sorceries and just kill someone in one shot. So that's fun. Since we're green, we're obviously going to do what green does, and mana ramp. So we have a few things. So we have Soul Ring, just because Soul Ring. Emerald Medallion, not really a card people use, but it's mono green, so we can take advantage of that. And also, we want to keep mana up, keep lands up, so we can actually use them to attack when we activate Anthousa. So instead of having those like instants and sorceries that cost 2 mana, like green on a colorless, they only cost 1 green. So we have more forests or lands to attack with. So that's why it's in. Nature's Lore, you find a forest, it comes into play untapped. That's cool. Cultivate. Harrow. I like this one. 1, because it's full art, and 2, because the 2 non-basic lands that come into play untapped. So you could play Harrow, and then right after that play Nature's Lore, and so you've ramped even more than you would that turn if you just played like Cultivate. The only drawback is, in order to cast it, you also have to sacrifice a land. You just got to be careful with counter magic. So, blue players. Rampant Growth. Just Rampant Growth. Yavimaya Elder isn't exactly ramping, but it finds you 2 basic lands, and you can, if you kill it with its own ability, you draw a card. So it's good. Sakura-Tribe Elder, just a giant Rampant Growth on a 1/1, and he's a snake shaman, so that's cool. Solemn Simulacrum is, I think, the last ramper, I believe. Yep. And he's just solemn because he's great. And now these are random green cards that I put in here because they're good. Harmonize, also textless, so you draw 3 cards for 4 mana. Yeah, that's good. Explore, a little bit of ramping and drawing a card. Great. Primeval Bounty. I like this card a lot because, well, I'll tell you what it says. It's an enchantment for 6, and when you cast a creature, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you get a 3/3 beast. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you put 3+1/+1 counters on a target creature you control. And whenever you play a land, you gain 3 life. So what does this do in our deck? We're not too worried about the first ability, but the second two we are. We just like to gain life because we're a little slower, so we can, survive just a little bit more, a little longer whenever we play lands. And the second ability of whenever you play a non-creature spell, you get 3 counters on a target creature. Now what you can do is when you target Anthousa with a spell, while Primeval Bounty's in play, obviously, you can stack the triggers so that your lands first turn into creatures, and then you can put the 3+1/+1 counters onto one of those lands. And those counters stay on that land that you chose, so you can then activate it again, and instead of having a 2/2 warrior, you have a 5/5, because those counters stay on. Garruk Primal Hunter, he's great. He can provide blockers, attackers. He can, win the game winning ultimates by putting giant worms on the battlefield, because we have a lot of ramp, so we can have a lot of those. The -3 is really what I'm looking for, because, just without any boosts, you can draw 4 cards when you have Anthousa out. That's okay. But you can draw more cards when you, give her Giant Growth or Mutagenic Growth or whatever. So, you need to find the card draw when you can, when you're in green. Plus it's Garruk, and he's cool. Skyshroud Blessing, a card I didn't know existed. It's kooky, because obviously people are going to try to, play to Anthousa's disadvantage of making lands creatures and then trying to blow them up with, like, Lightning Bolt or just burn spells or whatever. So you can just play Skyshroud Blessing, and they can't be the target of spells or abilities. And then you draw a card. So, at worst, you're paying 2 mana to draw a card. But it's still fun to get people with this. Beast Within, just a mono green EDH staple. The 3/3 beast isn't that important, so destroy target permanent. Great. Sealed Primordium, a naturalized that you pay for in advanced. And Krosan Grip, just destroy more things. Eternal Witness, to get back something, just in case you need it. Acidic Slime, more blowing up things, and you get a Death Touch 2/2, so that's good. Dungrove Elder, like I said, is in the deck, so you want a lot of forests. And I just really like the full art, so that's why he's in here. I definitely could have found much better big dudes in the deck, but I like these two because he has hexproof, and Allosaurus Rider can be played technically for free, quote unquote, technically for free, by just removing 2 green cards that you don't need at the moment, and you get a big guy if you have a bunch of lands. Or on turn 1, you can just have a 1/1 or a 2/2. I just like him because he's riding a dinosaur. Now, these are some cards that kind of spice up the 2/2 warriors you get from Anthousa, just because they're a little weak, and you can make them better. So we first have Timber Protector. So he's a Treefolk warrior from Lorwyn that he says all your other Treefolk get +1/+1, and then he also says all your other Treefolk are indestructible, and your forests are indestructible. So, whenever we activate Anthousa and make 3 of our forests, make our forest warriors, they are then 2/2 indestructible warrior forest creatures. That's pretty cool. Coat of Arms. I love this card in EDH. It's just so fun to play this, and it just makes everything ridiculous, including this this deck. So, Coat of Arms is each creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature in play that shares a creature type with it. So, since Anthousa is a warrior, and Anthousa makes 3 warrior creatures, just by activating her ability once, they each get +3/+3. That's only if these are the 4 creatures on the battlefield. They each get +3/+3 just by activating her ability, which is cool. There are other random warriors in the deck, like Allosaurus Rider and Timber Protector. I didn't even realize Allosaurus Rider was a warrior until now. Moving on. And it just makes things ridiculous. If you activate her ability more than once in one turn, then your warriors, herself, and your forest warriors get even bigger. It's just really great. It's really fun. Play Coat of Arms whenever you can. Nature's Will. One of the problems with the deck is, obviously, it restricts your mana to be your creature base. So, what you want to do is get as many untapped as you can with your lands. So we have Nature's Will. So whenever one of my creatures deals damage to a player, I untap all my lands, and then my opponent taps all lands they control. The last part is not that important. The first part is. So I can use her ability, swing in with some of my tree warriors, and when they hit someone, I get to untap all my lands. So I basically, I make more mana that way. And plus you can shut down blue players and stuff when they're holding out mana. Druids Repository is also good because whenever one of your creatures attacks, you get a charge counter on Druids Repository, and all you need to do is remove 1 counter to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So basically, you basically get these 2/2 warriors for free whenever you activate the ability, because then you have these 3 charge counters stored onto Druid's Repository. So it makes up for the loss of having to use your lands to attack. Beastmaster Ascension. This just makes your warriors or any other creature you have huge. So it only takes 2 turns to attack. At worst, 2 turns when you have your tree folk warriors out, forest warriors. So they become 7/7s whenever you activate Anthousa. It's ridiculous when you get this. Sasuke, Son of Shishiro. He's so neat because he gives warriors Death Touch. We're not really worried about giving other snakes +1/+0, but he and other warriors who control have Death Touch. So basically, Anthousa has Death Touch, her warriors she makes has Death Touch, Allosaurus Rider has Death Touch. It's awesome. So, Snake Warrior. Now, these are a few cards that make targeting Anthousa better. I think the 3/2/2 ability is neat. It's good and it's decent, but a few of these push it to the edge, such as Wild Defiance. So now, every time you target Anthousa with an instant or sorcery spell, or any creature you control, they get +3/+3. So, with this out, any spell you cast gets +3/+3, and then you get 3/2/2 warriors. Another card I didn't know existed. Livewire Lash gives the equipped creature +2/+0, and has another kind of heroic ability. Whenever it becomes the target of a spell, you deal 2 damage to target creature or player. So it's almost like removal for small creatures. So not only do you get 3/2/2 warriors, you get 2 damage. Leering Emblem. Okay, so it says, whenever you play a spell, equipped creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So that's whenever you play a creature, an enchantment, an artifact, or an instant or sorcery. Just any spell you cast. And the equipped creature gets +2/+2. So it's kind of more of an add-on for Anthousa. And plus these 2 are relatively cheap to cast and equip, so that's why they're in. Sphinx-Bone Wand. Yes, we're playing Sphinx-Bone Wand in a mono-green deck. Because, like I said, half of the deck is about 1/3 of the deck is instants and sorceries to target Anthousa with. So, you just keep getting charge counters on Sphinx-Bone Wand, and you just keep shooting things. It's just so funny. And now for the end of the deck is all of the cards I chose to target with and the target Anthousa with. So let's start with Giant Growth. It's Giant Growth. +3/+3 for 1 mana. And it's full art. Why not play it? It's funny because you're playing Giant Growth in Commander. Okay. Irresistible Prey. A lot of these cards were chosen just because they have the 3-word phrase, draw a card, the best phrase in Magic, stapled onto the end. So, Irresistible Prey. Target creature must be blocked if able. Not important. Draw a card. Great. Whip Silk. This is a 1-mana enchantment aura that gives a creature reach. And then you can pay 1 more green to return it to its owner's hand. So, what you can do is you can, when you have Primeval Bounty out, you can play Whip Silk, targeting Anthousa, and then put the counters on a land, and then return Whip Silk to your hand. And then you can target Anthousa again, activating Heroic Trigger again, and then activating the +3/+3 counters again. And you can see how this goes. And plus it's 1 mana, and you can return it if, Anthousa's about to die or something, so you can, save your Whip Silk. Tel-Jilad Defiance. I don't know how to say that. Target creature gains protection from artifacts until end of turn, and draw a card. It's, can be somewhat useful when you face a deck with a lot of artifacts, I guess. Feral Instinct, 2 mana, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn, draw a card, at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. Alpha Status. This card is funny, because the enchanting creature gets +2/+2 for each other creature in play that shares a creature type with it. So, just by targeting Anthousa with Alpha Status alone, she will get +6/+6, because you make your 3 warriors from your lands. And any other time after that you target her, she'll get even bigger. So, it's great. You can kill people with commander damage with just this card, and, targeting Anthousa a bunch of times. Hunter's Prowess. Standard staple. I'm just kidding. Hunter's Prowess is good in this deck because, you get to draw cards, and Anthousa's, not that small, so she'll be a 7/8 with Trample. It gains Trample, and you draw cards for how many damage you deal to your opponent. That's cool. So, it's a pump, it gives it Trample, and it replaces itself with a lot of cards. Hunter's Insight, same thing, basically. But you can also attack Planeswalkers and get those cards as well. And it's an instant, so you can kind of surprise people with it. Prey Upon. Green Removal. You can use this to target, Anthousa, get your lands, and then remove a blocker that an opponent has, and then you can swing in. It's 1 mana. It doesn't hurt for this kind of effect, so. I'm thinking about putting in the card with the bear punch. I don't know, I forgot what it's called, from Cons, but he's punching a bear, and that's fun. Wild Size. Target creature gets +2/+2, gains Trample until end of turn, and you draw a card. Awesome. Viridescent Wisps, 1 mana for target creature becomes green and gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Draw a card. Don't mind if I do. Rancor. It gives Anthousa Trample and +2/+0. Activates her 2/2 warriors, and if she dies, heaven forbid, Rancor goes back to your hand, so that's good. Sudden Strength. Target creature gets +3/+3, and draw a card. Great. This one's a little pricey, but, you get +3/+3, and it says draw a card. I don't have to reason with you people. Refresh. Regenerate target creature. One of the only ones that actually have any sort of purpose besides drawing a card, because you can save Anthousa from a kill spell or something. So, Reality Anchor. Target creature loses shadow until end of turn and draw a card. I didn't know this one existed. I don't think anyone knows this card existed. Aggressive Urge. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Draw a card. Warrior's Lesson. This one doesn't directly say draw a card, but we have a flavor win because Anthousa is noted in the flavor text, and plus you can then draw 2 cards from this if you target Anthousa and one of your warriors that's already attacking, so you can play this after you've already made your treefolk guys. Primal Bellow. One of these getcha cards, because the target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each forest you control. I thought about putting like Blanchwood Armor in here, which is an enchantment that has the same effect, but I like this one because you can sneak it on people, and you can sneak it on other people's creatures, you know, to mess up combat, which I'll talk about after I show the rest of the cards. Bear Umbra. This one's great because it untaps the lands we attack with, and we can, you know, cast more cards, and it protects Anthousa with the totem armor. Soul's Majesty. Draw cards equal to the power of target creature you control. Green card draw. We get what we can get. So, we have Soul's Majesty. Lace with Moonglove. Target creature gains Death Touch until end of turn, and draw a card. This one is great when you give Anthousa Trample, because then she only needs to assign 1 damage to the creature that's blocking her, and then you can just trample right through with the rest of the damage. So it's almost like unblockable, kind of. Weird. And the last 3 cards are free. Kind of. So we have Invigorate, which, if you control Forest, which I hope we do, you can give an opponent 3 life rather than pay for Invigorate's mana cost, and target creature gets +4/+4. You don't have to even give the 3 life to the person you're going to be attacking. You can give it to another player if you're playing like in a pod or so. I usually just like to ask who wants 3 life, and I give it to them. So that one's fun. Bounty of the Hunt. Not a very powerful card, but we get a free activation for Anthousa just by removing a green card in our hand from game, rather than pay the mana cost of 5, which is a lot for just giving, for just having 3 different triggers of +1/+1. Note, this only activates Anthousa's heroic ability once because it's only 1 spell. But you can give all 3 instances to Anthousa to give her +3/+3. The last card is Mutagenic Growth. It's probably the freest one because you just have to pay 2 life to give Anthousa +2/+2 and activate the warrior creatures. So, obviously a big part of the deck is activating Anthousa and making your 2/2 warriors and, you know, running people over. But with all of your instants and sorceries that target Anthousa, you can also use them to target other people's creatures. As crazy as that sounds, you can, when 2 people are in combat, you can mess them up by giving one certain creature Death Touch, or giving another creature +3/+3, or giving one creature protection from artifacts. It just makes all combat very silly, and you kind of get to be the judge of who wins in combat. So I think that's a really cool part of the deck that, you know, has never been explored before, and it can only happen when you have, you know, a bunch of these really low impact pump effects. So that's another part of the deck I really enjoy. Thanks for watching CMDR Decks. Please subscribe and favorite.